I grew up in Castle Hill, which I don't know if anyone's from the Hills District here. Back then, Sydney was a different place you visited once, every now and again. There was no M2. You had to catch a bus, a train, and then sometimes we'd meet for pupil-free days at Town Hall and go watch a movie, and that was a really big day excursion. I then moved to Blacktown, and in that period of my life, my parents actually worked very working class jobs. My mother worked in retail most of her life, at McDonald's and working at Target, as we like to call it. And my dad worked in computers for a while, but then ended up doing work around sort of handyman work and working in construction and other sort of odd man jobs to make the ends meet, as well as working in a service station. And I'm proud that we live in a country where we have an education system and we have an environment that someone like myself from very humble beginnings gets the opportunities that I've had in order to end up speaking with you here tonight, to run a company with almost 4,000 people and to sort of have a success. And I think it's a testament to this country, but also this city that everyone in our country and this city have the opportunities to make something of themselves, no matter where they come from and the background that they have. So we're here tonight to celebrate the 50th anniversary of BESydney and the 10th year of the BESydney Global Ambassador Program. But I think what we're really here tonight is because we believe in the prosperity of Sydney. We believe in the prosperity of New South Wales, and we believe in the prosperity of Australia. All of you here are here because you want to make this city, this state and this nation a better place for you and for your children. Now, 20 years ago when I started Atlassian, we had to choose where we wanted to grow our company. And the natural place for us would have been to move to Silicon Valley. That's where many of our customers were. That is where much of the talent that we need even today resides. But my partner and myself chose to stay here in Sydney. And we chose to stay and raise our kids here because we believe that Sydney is the best city in the world, and we want to continue to make it that way. And for us, that means technology jobs. If we want to make sure that our kids have the quality of life that we do, we want to make sure it's a prosperous nation, we need to be creating technology jobs here in Australia. Now, technology has freed Australia from the tyranny of distance. When the first fleet arrived, there was nothing to export back to Britain. We didn't have a spice trade. You couldn't really export lumber. That made no sense. Fruit would spoil. And it wasn't until we actually discovered wool that we could ship something that was light enough and valuable enough back to England in order to have a trade. And since then, Australia has been defined by the tyranny of distance. We are a long way from the rest of the world. And that's been a problem for a long time. It's affected things like our car industry. But today, because technology drives so much of the world's economy, we are finally freed from the tyranny of distance. Now, this has a positive effect. That means that companies like Atlassian, Cochlear, ResMed can compete on a global stage. But it also has a negative effect. It means that every company in Australia needs to compete on a global stage. Taxis Combined and GoCatch, the booking app, needs to compete with Uber. Foxtel's biggest competition is no longer free-to-air TV. It is Netflix and Disney Plus and other global companies. And I believe that technology is totally here to stay. It's not going anywhere. And there are three types of companies. There are tech companies. There are those companies who are trying to become tech companies, and those who are being disrupted by them. Technology is the #1 industry in the world, and it is also growing the fastest. And growing my company Atlassian, I've had a front row seat to this technology disruption. When Mike and I met, we were both studying a scholarship at the University of New South Wales in 2002, and we set our company up literally from our bedrooms, before getting a small office in Kent Street and then moving our office above the sex shop on York Street. I hope none of you know where that is. Awkward silence. Anyway, so we had no money. We bootstrapped ourselves with a $10,000 loan from a credit card. Proving the value of skilled immigration, our first employee was a backpacker named Owen Fellows from England, who literally walked into our office one day and said, "Can I get a job?" And our office is actually the back of someone else's office at the time, so he really walked up to our desks and said, "Can I have a job?" And at the time, we weren't looking for any employees, but it was a Friday afternoon, and it was about lunchtime, time to go to the pub. And so we all went to the pub, and by 5 p.m. that evening, we had our very first employee, and he slept on my couch for a month. As a company, we sold globally from day one. Our first 2 sales were to the United Kingdom. Our next 3 were to Sweden, the United States, and Germany. We sold to 13 other countries, including Puerto Rico and Slovenia, before we made our very first sale in Australia. Now, at Atlassian, our products and what they do is to help other companies collaborate better. And mostly we sell to technology companies, but we also sell to teams building technology inside traditional companies. Now, is anyone here familiar with the company Epic Games? Perhaps your son or daughter spends hours and maybe much of your hard-earned savings playing their online game Fortnite. Anyone familiar with that? Atlassian's products help Fortnite and their software to stay up 24/7 and service their customers around the world. Apologies for that. Now, they're one of hundreds and thousands of examples of software companies, but there are also many more non-software companies who use our products. Atlassian helps NASA to support their missions to Mars. Atlassian helps the UN to plan their climate change campaigns. Atlassian helps the NBA to bring their digital experiences to their customers that are now around the world. Now, from just the 2 of us, Atlassian have now grown to a company of more than 4,000 people around the world, and with over $1 billion in annual revenue. We sell to over 160,000 companies globally, and we have tens of millions of users every single week. So this gives us a unique view in how the business world is changing and how technology is transforming every single industry. I do want to repeat again, there are only 3 types of companies. Tech companies, those who are trying to become tech companies, and those who are being disrupted by them. Australia produces about 1.5% of the world's GDP, which I think is pretty good for a small country of only 25 million people. But if we want to maintain our standard of living, if we want to have prosperous jobs, if we want a great society for our children, we're going to have to produce 1.5% of the world's technology in order to stay competitive. Now, I believe we have the ability to do this. If I stood here 20 years ago when I started Atlassian, I wouldn't have believed it to be true. But today, we have built a thriving technology industry here in Australia. Today, according to Smart Company and others, there are 52 companies founded by Australians since 2011. So this is in the last 8 years. There are 52 companies worth more than $100 million. 14 of those are worth more than $500 million. And 6 of them, and these are companies started in the last 8 years, 6 of them are worth more than $1 billion. We have built some amazing technology companies here in Australia and here in Sydney. And for me, it's been a privilege to play a small part and hopefully be a role model for many of these companies. But we need to do more. Now, in most cases, technology industry would prefer government not to be involved. I think there were many years ago when we said, well, government's ignoring us, we want government to be more involved in what we do. And then I think some of the tech giants in the US have looked around and said, we'd really prefer if the government wasn't involved in what we do. We'd prefer to be heads down, creating the future, creating jobs. And to be honest, as an industry, we really suck at actually interacting with the government. It's not something we have built, a muscle that we have built well. But there are some specific areas that I think government can help. Now, before I do that, and in something unusual for a speech, I want to give credit where credit is due to the government. there have been some areas where the government has been instrumental in fixing market failures. Export market development grants. I don't know if anyone is familiar with those in Australia. Yes, we've got some people waving at the back there. Export market development grants helped offset the marketing costs involved in Australian companies exporting their goods overseas. This is a fantastic program because it really targets companies that are bringing export dollars to Australia. Early stage venture capital limited partnerships. Try saying that at 9:30 at night after a few wines. ESVCLPs, introduced in 2015, they truly resurrected the moribund venture capital industry in Australia. 5 years ago, I would say and recommend to startups that they seek venture capital overseas. Today, I think that we have all the capital we need in Australia, and there is no problem for startups to source their venture funding here in Sydney. And so I think that is a huge achievement from everyone involved, and I would give a round of applause. The state government, from Gladys on down, have worked with us to establish a technology centre in Sydney, and I want to talk a little bit about that more later. But there are some challenges that remain. Government and business investment in R&D lags other countries. So investing in creating new things in Australia lags other countries. We're the lucky country. That means it hasn't impacted our economy so far because we can dig stuff out of the ground, because people want to come to Australia for conferences, for recreation, for holidays. And so all those things have helped buoy the Atlassian economy. But we need to change that if we want to be competitive in the future. Now, it was interesting, the Federal Treasurer actually called for more business investment in R&D. And Atlassian have been doing this for years, but we think the government should do its bit too. Now, in recent years, the government have reduced their support for R&D's tax incentive, which has actually meant that many companies that would previously have been investing in R&D are now having to make a choice whether they do that or not. And so we'd really call on the federal government to make sure that it's easier to invest in R&D rather than harder. Now the venture capital is up and running well in Sydney and Australia. The biggest problem we all face is the shortage of qualified talent, qualified people to help grow these technology businesses that we are starting here. Now, in the short term, we need to make sure that our immigration policies allow us to bring in experienced talent from overseas. If we continue to grow technology sector at a fast pace, which we hope to do, there's no point growing a technology sector at 5% a year. You want to double and triple the technology we have here in Australia. If we continue to do that, we need talented people from around the world to help grow that industry. And my experience at Atlassian is that bringing one experienced person from overseas helps train 12 more of those people here in Australia. Now, we need to import people in the short term, but that's not a long-term fix. The most important priority we have long-term is our education system. We need to give children the opportunity to learn programming concepts as early as possible during their primary and secondary studies. Now, some of you may say that not everyone will be a programmer. That's true. But not everyone who learns English goes on to be a poet. We teach English because communication is a fundamental skill. And similarly, computing in this day and age and understanding technology and how it works is a fundamental skill. Now, I was lucky enough to go to James Roos Agricultural High, a state school, one of the top selective schools in the country. Now, the historic rationale for selective agricultural schools is obvious. Agriculture has long been central to Australia's prosperity. But today, I can make an even stronger case for intense educational focus on developing computational skills. More and more nations are making this a priority. I know that the United Kingdom, Vietnam, and even Estonia, Estonia, are making coding a key part of their education. Now, I want to thank the government for making headway here. We are doing a lot more than we were 5 years ago when we started making this a priority, so I want to thank you for that, but we need to continue to do more and ensure that all of your children get an opportunity to learn the skills that they'll need for the workforce of tomorrow. We need to graduate more students in technology because Atlassian has now more than 1,500 employees here in Sydney. In the past 5 years, we've employed 208 graduates coming out of universities. And I can tell you from personal experience, while we have amazing graduates coming out, we really are taking the lion's share, and we're getting comments from other companies trying to recruit that there are just not enough grads out there. I'm proud to say that next year we're welcoming our biggest ever grad intake of over 100 graduates into Atlassian. And so we're just not graduating enough students in computer science to make sure our technology industry can stay here in Sydney. Now lastly, I would think that every single person in this room believes that place and setting are important. I went to the BESydney website today and it says, "This remarkable city and its people provide the environment needed to generate genuine progress." This remarkable city and its people provide the environment needed to generate genuine progress. And I and Atlassian too believe in the power of place, the power of geography, and the power of community. So that's the vision behind our plan to build a vibrant technology precinct around the viable technology precinct at Central Station, with Atlassian being the anchor tenant. We believe that Sydney has the potential to be one of the world's leading technology cities, and the creation of Tech Precinct sends a loud signal, not just to Australia, but around the world, that we're in a race to take a slice of the world's most valuable market. That's a really exciting place to be. I want to thank Gladys and the New South Wales government, who've worked side by side with us for more than 2 years to bring this plan to fruition. And we're going to create a world-leading headquarters that everyone in Sydney can be proud of. I tell people that if you want to become a judge, you can go down to the Supreme Court and watch someone in action. If you want to become a doctor, we have hospitals. If you want to become a journalist, you can turn up to any number of publications and see how they work. But there is no epicenter for technology in Sydney. If you want to join the world's largest and fastest and most dynamic industry, there's no place to go in Sydney, and that's what we want to change. One last thing is, given Sydney's hub and spoke transport system, putting our tech precinct at Central ensures that a job in technology is accessible to every single person in Sydney. Whether you live in Surrey Hills, Cronulla, Penrith or Campbelltown, jobs in the tech precinct are accessible for all. So I want to thank the New South Wales Government and the Premier for having the foresight to sponsor this project. It's an exciting vision, and as I said at the outset, everyone here in this room is shared and united by a shared goal, which is to create a prosperous city, state and nation for ourselves and our children, and I'm glad to play a small part of that. Thank you for having me tonight.